Howdy! Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and explain the code to y'all through my blueprints. We go ahead and start with the inputs to the switch ID. As you can see, this is how we determine which spell to cast. Basically how this works is we take an integer, which is named as an ID from the input, and we pass the switch on int, and it checks. You take the ID and you put it into this node as a parameter, and it checks this value against these. And so if this is a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, then it will select that path and go execute the nodes following on that path. And if it doesn't exist as one of these pins, then it just doesn't execute. So if we got like a 5 or a -1 as an integer, we would do nothing. But if we get 0 through 4, we will do one of these 5 nodes, node paths. So that's the first one. The second section of code that is important is how we call the different spells, which is this bit right here. As you can see, we take an input, and if it's 0 through 4, then it will go to one of these. So if it's 0, we will call the actor Fireball. If it's 1, we will call small AoE, and then 2 is large AoE, and call Orbital, and call Electric Arc, as perspective to the 3 and the 4 as well. So that calls those blueprint classes, which are blueprints that I wrote, and we'll look at those here in a little bit. How we determine where to spawn these is through this. So what we have to do is we have to access the right controller and convert it from a target to a motion controller, because when you click and drag off of that, that makes it reference as a motion controller, and we want it to reference to these as targets. So you kind of have to cast its type to get it to work with these nodes. So you cast its type to a target from a motion controller, and here you're going to find its world rotation and its break rotator. And so off of those, we find its rotation and we find its rotator, and we copy that, and we're going to assign that to our new transform that we're making here as its rotation value. As far as its location value goes, we're going to find the world location of the right controller and set that as the location of this new transform. And we're going to make it point to the size of it in X, Y, and Z. And as you can see, that value goes into the spawn transform of each of those. And that's how these classes know how big to make these actors, these blueprints, and where to put them and in what direction they need to be facing. So that's some pretty cool stuff right there. On this one, you can kind of see we have this whole bit about a particle system. And that was just to show y'all that doing it this way, by attaching this return value, this class takes a parameter that is a particle system, and it will activate that particle system on it so that you can have a cool effect. This one's called Fire Red. So basically, you're just going to execute the set template, and whenever you do the set template after you call the actor Fireball, it takes this target, it takes this, assigns it to that target, to the particle system, which goes to here, which goes to this class, and assigns this particle system to that class, basically. And then it'll execute the output, which basically means now do it. So this sets it all up, and that says do it. So, lastly, we'll look at the different spells, and I'll have a different post for each of those, but just go ahead and walk y'all through them real quick. We have our Fireball, which is a basic, simple one target spell. You shoot it out once, and it hits one target, and it does damage to them. We have a small area of effect, which is an explosion-based damage, and you hit a large area, and then it deals damage to a pretty decent size around the explosion. This is our large AoE, which I made to look like a curse, more or less, and it's generally the same idea. You cast out a spell and it explodes, and then around it you deal damage to objects around it, but instead of just being a smaller area, it's quite a large area. We have this Call Orbital Strike, and this one you cast out a spell, and wherever that spell hits, it gets an area around it, and from up above it assigns a new spell, and those spells lock on to the targets that are within that area, and basically spells rain down from up above. And I made them to look like meteorites so that it would look kind of like you were calling a meteor strike down on them. And that one was actually pretty fun to do, and there's some good code behind that one. And by far my favorite is the Spawn Actor Call Electric Arc. And this one had to have some pretty interesting logic in it as well to make it work the way that I wanted to. So I'll explain these more in depth in a little bit and make them not sound as lame as I just did, and so that y'all can see how cool they really are. And hopefully in a little bit I'll be able to show y'all some video of the spells being cast as well.